Today's episode is called Who's Driving? Workflows versus Agents. One question separates them, and it isn't tool use. So here you have two teams. Both said they have built an invoice agent. Let's look at this in pseudocode. First, you have the model that does the extraction. After that, it's all deterministic. It's all if, then. That's team number one. And team number two here, it's actually the model that makes the decision. So it's doing the extraction, and after that, if you look here in the pseudocode, you're basically every step you're asking the model what to do. And this is what we call agentic. So this is workflow with the code, and this is what we call the agent. If we look at what we have and what separates them, both call the model, right? You could tell me, yeah, we're using the agent in both ways. Both are using the tools. The problem is that team A calls the model on every single invoice. It's still a workflow because every path it could take was knowable before it ran. Here, it's actually the agent taking the decisions. So the whole dissection collapses to one question: who chooses the next step at runtime? So it was actually Anthropic that made the distinction between both, like the workflows and the agents. Workflows are basically systems where LLMs and tools are orchestrated through predefined code paths. And agents, as defined by them, are systems where LLMs dynamically direct their own processes and tool usage. This is maintaining control over how they accomplish tasks, predefined versus dynamically. Now, actually, two people talked about this. One of them is Harrison Chain of LangChain, and he said that an AI agent is a system that uses an LLM to decide the control flow of an application. And Simon Willison, who said an LLM agent runs tools in a loop to achieve a goal. So all of these are definitions. I think the difference between agent and workflow is very, very clear here. And we come to the main question is who owns the control flow at runtime? That's how you know if you have an agent or workflow. And tool use can be the line. Anthropic calls the augmented LLM model plus retrieval, tools, and memory. So the basic building block of agentic systems. And it's the foundation for both sides, for workflows and agents. So let's look at our invoice system. We have 4 decision points. We have which extractor to use. As you see here, you have exception or post, which vendor to record, retry or escalate. And you have a decision to make. Code decides, or you have the model decides. You can make it for just exception or post. So here you just have code deciding for everything, but just there is one point where you can say, yeah, either model or code. One thing is that at every single point, it's either model or code. You cannot basically have them both at the same time. So that's something I wanted to say about what Anthropic is saying or what LangChain is talking about, is how to define like how agentic is a system. For me, and this is my own assessment here, is that you have a process. If you're deploying an agentic system, you have a process. And at every point, you're going to be deciding, okay, code or model, and then you'd find a fraction. So some people are fighting about this. They're saying, oh, it's like either it's like night or day, either it's agentic or not. I believe it's actually a shade of gray, as they say. Now for the chase ladder, which describes how agentic a system is. Here you have router, which is choosing between defined states, either black or white, for example. State machine is you're making a decision between multiple states, and autonomous agent is you're making decision in a changing space. So it's the agent that makes the change on the system. And this is how to say the progression in how agentic is a certain system. So actually, there is a good example of this. Anthropic actually lists 5 workflow patterns, and one of them is called the orchestrator workers one. And let's read the description of it. So it's saying a central LLM dynamically breaks down tasks, delegates, and synthesizes their results. And the key difference is its flexibility. So Subtasks are not predefined, but determined by the orchestrator based on the specific input. Dynamically, I say clearly, dynamically, not predefined, both of these. So this is a problem because both of these sit awkwardly next to predefined code paths. If the orchestrator here is picking subtasks at runtime, then by their own definition, the model is choosing the next step, right? So, and that is the agent side. So here it shouldn't be a workflow because the agent is deciding by their own definition what are the steps we are doing. So the boundary they actually created is not clear. And this was criticized by experts. For example, Ronald Ashry, he said these definitions are not that clear or even consistent between them, which is true. So yeah, and treat it as a spectrum, not a binary, which is the same point I was saying, scripted versus policy-driven orchestration at runtime. As of mid-2026, there is no canonical definition of agent. Willison once collected 211 crowd-sourced ones. Stop arguing about the word, please. It does not resolve. So at this point, you just need to ask at different points in your process who is deciding. You don't need to say generally if your whole system is agentic or not. It's a shade of gray, as they say. So everyone would be watching this episode and would be telling why are we talking about vocabulary fight? So all of this is because the moment you want to build an agentic system, really an agent, you're creating four problems. First of all, the cost. So the more you're going to make decisions, agents by definition take more money than deterministic if-thens, So you win in complexity and thought, but you lose on cost. Second, oversight. OpenAI names two triggers that warrant a human, first, exceeding failure thresholds, and second, high-risk actions. So, for example, canceling user orders, authorizing large refunds, making payments, etc., etc. Third, you have liability. Actually, Air Canada argued its chatbot was a separate legal entity responsible for its own actions. The tribunal, of course, rejected that and made the airline pay. So, yeah, you're actually responsible for your own agent if it's deployed in your own company. And fourth is the law defines AI systems as designed to operate with varying levels of autonomy. Autonomy is written into statute as the axis. So, one honest note, critics argue treating autonomy as a slider is a mechanical misreading since the real shift is architectural. Single pass becomes continuous loop. Yeah, either way, the moment you call it an agent, you inherit all of these issues, all of these, not really issues, but, because these seem like, yeah, so why even use agents if you have all of these negatives? But you're actually winning lots of things by using agents. But you need to build smart systems, of course. So this is more of a definition slide. You have actually 5 definitions for the same thing here. Notice one thing, most define an agent by goal environment, not control flow. So control flow is the builder's cut, not the only one. So I'm not going to read to you all of these definitions. One thing to notice is that most of those define an agent by goal environment, not by control flow. You can read them on your own here. You can pause the video and read them. So it's pragmatic and testable. You can point at the code, but it's not the only defensible definition. And the thing is, what actually ships leans hard one way. If you look at statistics, 68% of production case studies, 16 of 20, use structured workflows rather than open-ended autonomy. And 68% run at most 10 steps before a human steps in. So yeah, most of agentic AI is actually workflows. So yeah. Sources are on the screen from Pan and colleagues, Sackbot and colleagues, and the Google white paper. So, 2 more things I wanted to say before we leave. You have more autonomous, does not mean more advanced. So that's one point. And Anthropic's own summary says that success is not about building the most sophisticated system. It is about building the right system for your needs. And the framework does not decide which one you build. You can write an agent loop in 10 lines of plain code, and Anthropic recommends starting with the API directly because frameworks obscure the underlying prompts and responses. So to recap, we saw who decides at runtime to know if it's a workflow or agentic, or it's an agent or code, and how we saw how actually it's a shade of gray, a binary by point, and overall you have more agentic and less agentic systems. And the label carries the duties, which are cost, or oversight, liability, and law. So it has advantages, but you need to be careful around this. It's a trade-off like everything else in life. Finally, next episode, we will be talking about it in next episode. I don't want to give you an oversight already now. So if you like the content, please like and subscribe. Follow me on LinkedIn. Have a nice weekend.